You know, it's funny how some things in tech just become like so universal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
just totally ingrained in our experience,
Mm.
like the blue screen of death,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're like coding whiz
Yeah.
or you just watch cat videos all day.
Right.
That sudden blue screen, it's just like
It stalks
it stops you in your tracks.
Yeah.
And you've sent us some really interesting stuff on this. We've got like technical documents, a YouTube video transcript.
Yeah.
It seems like you want to go deep on this.
Absolutely.
So today we are taking a deep dive into why a blue screen.
Right. Why is it blue?
Why is it blue?
Why so dreaded?
Yeah, and maybe we'll uncover a few surprises along the way.
Exactly.
It's a great question. You're right. It's notoriety precedes it. But before we even get to like the why blue part,
It's helpful to understand like how these error screens even came to be.
yeah.
So back in the early days of Windows, like Windows 1.0,
Good. Yeah.
error messages, they were really bare bones.
Really?
Just text on a boot screen.
Oh, wow.
Nothing too dramatic.
So no cryptic code, no sudden blue takeover.
Not at all. Things started to get a little more visual with Windows 3.1.
Okay.
That's when they introduced like a blue screen for certain errors.
Okay.
And here's a curveball.
Okay.
This early blue screen wasn't quite the crash screen that we know today.
Okay.
It was more of a general system message screen.
Wow.
You might even see it if you hit Control, Alt, Delete to close a program.
Really?
Yeah.
So the blue screen had like a bit of an identity crisis in its early days.
A little bit, yeah.
But I'm guessing that's where most people, like, their mental model comes from, is that Windows 3.1 kind of era.
Yeah, it's a common assumption.
Okay.
But even though Windows NT, which eventually led to the Windows we use now,
Yeah.
also adopted the blue screen,
Right.
it wasn't actually directly inspired by those earlier versions.
Really? You'd think they'd want to maintain, like, some sort of visual consistency.
You would think so, but
Okay. So if it's not coming from those earlier versions, how does the Windows NT blue screen come about?
right.
Our sources mention someone named John Vert.
Ah, yes, John Vert. This is where the story takes a bit of a turn.
Okay.
Dave Plummer, a former Microsoft engineer, actually went on a quest to find, like, the father of the blue screen.
Oh, wow.
And it involved a few humorous detours, including a case of mistaken identity at a retirement home.
Okay, wait. We have to hear more about this, like a tech detective story.
It really is.
Wow.
Plummer had some initial assumptions about the blue screen. He thought it was designed to be very noticeable in a lab setting,
Okay.
almost impossible to miss.
Yeah.
But it turns out that wasn't the initial intention at all.
Huh. So all those assumptions about lab visibility, about it being based on the Windows 3.1 screen,
All debunked.
debunked,
Totally.
debunked. And that mistaken identity at the retirement home, well, let's just say it highlights the importance of double-checking your sources.
Yeah.
But the real John Vert, the one who coded the NT blue screen,
Yeah?
well, the reason behind his choice of blue is surprisingly simple.
Okay.
And a bit ironic considering how much anxiety that blue screen has caused people over the years.
You're killing me here. Just tell us. Okay. It comes down to the workstation that John Vert was using when he coded it.
Okay.
It was a MIPS workstation,
Okay.
which might sound a bit technical.
And feel free to get technical. That's what
Yeah.
we're here for. But for those of us who might not be familiar, what is a MAMI-PASS workstation?
Yeah, so it's basically a specialized computer system, more common in like certain research or engineering fields.
Okay.
And the one that Vert used just happened to have a default display of white text on a blue background.
So he's looking at this blue screen all day while he's coding, and it just kind of bleeds over into his work. That's hilarious.
It seems that way, yeah.
Ah.
And here's another layer to the story. His code editor of choice, Slick Edit, also used white text on a blue background.
Wow.
So it was a case of visual consistency,
Ugh.
just not in the way anyone expected.
It's like this weird accident of history. Like, oh, I'm used to seeing important stuff in white text on blue. Might as well make this air screen the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this actually highlights a broader point about early UI design.
Okay.
It was often influenced by the tools developers had on hand, their personal preferences, even the things that they were already accustomed to seeing on their screens.
That makes you wonder how many other design choices we take for granted today
Right.
have these quirky origin stories behind them. But going back to the blue screen,
Yeah,
it hasn't always been the same shade of blue, has it?
you're right. Well, the core concept has remained consistent.
Okay.
The shade and even the overall design have evolved over time.
Yeah.
Early versions of the blue screen, like in Windows NT, were very bare bones. They'd show the error code, its name, some technical information for debugging, Think hexadecimal codes, those
Mm-hmm.
strings of numbers and letters.
Yeah, not exactly user-friendly. More
Yeah,
like, here's a cryptic message, good luck figuring it out.
exactly. But with Windows 2000, things started to change. They introduced a higher screen resolution, a clearer font,
Okay.
made it a little easier on the eyes, even if the news wasn't so good.
So a small step towards user empathy, even in the face of a system crash.
Absolutely. Then came Windows 8.
Yeah.
And with it, that memorable, if slightly jarring, addition of the sad face emoticon.
Oh, yeah, as if to say, we feel your pain, though I just thought it was a little bit funny, too.
A touch of dark humor, perhaps.
Yeah.
And more recently, in Windows 10, they've added a QR code to the blue screen.
Smart. Scan it with your phone and hopefully get some answers.
Exactly.
So we've gone from cryptic messages to QR codes. That's quite a journey for an error message.
It really is, yeah. But it speaks to how central the blue screen has become to the Windows experience.
Right?
Even though it represents an error, it's also become a symbol of the system trying to protect itself.
Our sources made a point of emphasizing that blue screens are actually a good thing in a way.
Absolutely. It's a sign that the system has encountered like a critical error
Yeah,
and is halting operations to prevent further damage.
kind of like a circuit breaker.
Yeah.
It trips before the whole house goes dark.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It's much better to have a blue screen and a chance to like recover your data
Right.
than risk corrupting your entire hard drive.
Like a controlled demolition rather than the whole building collapsing.
Exactly.
Now, for all the seriousness that we've been discussing, there are ways to have a little fun with the blue screen, right?
Oh, yeah.
One of our sources, Dave Plummer, mentioned a tool called Not My Fault.
Yes. Not my fault. Quite a blast from the past. It's a testament to the hacker spirit, always finding ways to tinker.
Right.
Even with, like, the most fundamental parts of the system.
And in this case, that tinkering involves changing the color of the blue screen.
Of course. Of course.
Red screen of doom. Not My Fault can do that. Feeling cheerful. How about a fuchsia screen of mild inconvenience? So you can customize your system crashes. I love it. But I have to say, like, after all this,
Yeah.
I kind of see the blue screen in a new light.
It's funny how that happens, right? You delve into the history of something so ubiquitous,
Yeah.
so seemingly mundane,
Right.
and then you just uncover these fascinating little details, these like human moments that just challenge your assumptions.
Absolutely. I mean, who knew that the blue screen, this icon of computer errors,
Yeah.
could be traced back to just a developer's workstation preference?
Right.
It really humanizes the whole experience.
It does, and it reminds us that design choices, even in like the most unexpected places,
Yeah.
often have these like layered stories behind them.
Right?
It's not always about grand visions or meticulous planning. Sometimes it's just about what feels familiar, what works in the moment.
Yeah, it's strangely reassuring in a way.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, if you were designing an error screen for a critical system today,
Right.
what would you do?
That's a great question to leave our listener with.
Yeah.
If you were designing an error screen,
Yeah.
what would it look like? What color would you choose?
Right.
And more importantly, why? What kind of message would you want to convey in that moment of system failure?
Right.
Because as we've seen with the blue screen, even error messages can become iconic.
Yeah, they can tell a story.
Like you said earlier, design choices have power even in unexpected places.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to our listener, we leave you with that challenge.
Mm.
How would you redesign the blue screen for the modern age?
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the surprisingly colorful world of the blue screen.
Yeah,
We hope you enjoyed the journey as much as we did.
absolutely.
Until next time.